In the bustling city of New York, Emily Harper lived a modest life with her husband, James, in a cozy apartment in Brooklyn. Emily, a soft-spoken graphic designer, had always been frugal, saving every penny for their dream of starting a small art studio together. James, a junior accountant, shared her vision, and they both worked tirelessly to make ends meet. However, their lives were overshadowed by James's domineering father-in-law, Richard Thornton, a wealthy real estate tycoon who never missed an opportunity to belittle Emily. Richard had never approved of Emily. To him, she was a nobody, a small-town girl with no pedigree, unworthy of his only son. He made it clear at every family gathering with cutting remarks about her cheap clothes or her lowly job. Emily endured it all for James's sake, swallowing her pride and keeping her head down. But one incident changed everything, setting off a chain of events that would turn Richard's world upside down. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Emily visited the bank to withdraw $50 from their joint savings account. They needed the money to cover a minor car repair. The teller, a kind woman named Maria, processed the transaction, but casually mentioned that Emily's account had a notification linked to another account she hadn't accessed in years. Curious, Emily asked for details. Maria explained that an old account, opened in Emily's name over a decade ago, had been dormant but was still active. The balance? A staggering $4.2 million. Emily's heart raced. She had no idea where this money came from. The account was tied to a trust fund, but the details were vague. Shocked and overwhelmed, she asked Maria to keep it confidential and left the bank with her $50, her mind spinning. That evening, she told James about the discovery, and they agreed to investigate before making any decisions. But fate had other plans. The next day was Thanksgiving, and the couple was invited to Richard's opulent Manhattan penthouse for dinner. As usual, Richard was in rare form, holding court at the head of the table, his voice dripping with condescension. When Emily mentioned the car repair in passing, Richard seized the opportunity to humiliate her. Car repair? What, you can't even afford a $50 fix? He sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. You're nothing but a beggar, Emily. My son deserves better than someone who can't even keep a car running without scraping by. The room fell silent. James's face reddened, but before he could speak, Emily calmly replied, I withdrew the $50 from our savings, Richard. It's no big deal. No big deal? Richard laughed, leaning back in his chair. You're pathetic. You'll never amount to anything, and you're dragging my son down with you. Emily's hands trembled, but she forced a smile. Inside, a fire was kindling. She thought of the $4.2 million sitting in that forgotten account. She thought of every insult, every slight, every time Richard had made her feel small. And in that moment, she decided she was done playing the victim. Over the next few weeks, Emily quietly investigated the mysterious account. With the help of a lawyer friend, Sarah, she uncovered the truth. The money came from her late grandmother, Margaret, who had been a silent investor in a tech startup decades ago. When the company went public, her shares skyrocketed in value, and the proceeds were placed in a trust fund for Emily, to be accessed when she turned 30. Emily had turned 30 6 months ago, but with no notification, the account had remained untouched. Margaret, a fiercely independent woman, had left a letter with the trust, instructing Emily to use the money to live boldly and never let anyone dim your light. Emily was stunned. She had grown up in a modest home, unaware of her grandmother's secret wealth. Now, she had the means to change her life and to settle a score. Emily devised a plan, not out of malice, but to teach Richard a lesson he'd never forget. She knew he prided himself on his wealth and influence, often boasting about his real estate empire and his untouchable status. But Emily had learned something else during her research. Richard's latest project, a luxury condo development called Thornton Towers, was in financial trouble. He had over-leveraged himself, borrowing heavily to fund the project, and was desperate for investors to keep it afloat. Emily saw her opportunity. Using a shell company set up by Sarah, she posed as an anonymous investor and approached Richard's firm, offering to inject $4 million into Thornton Towers in exchange for a 60% stake in the project. Richard, blindsided by the offer and desperate to save his reputation, jumped at the chance without asking too many questions. The deal was signed within days. The day of the big reveal came at a gala to celebrate the groundbreaking of Thornton Towers. Richard, dressed in a tailored tuxedo, strutted through the crowd, basking in the applause of New York's elite. Emily and James attended, with Emily wearing a stunning emerald gown she'd bought with her newfound confidence. Richard, spotting them, couldn't resist one last jab. Well, look who showed up, he said loudly, drawing attention. The beggar and her accountant. Don't embarrass me tonight, Emily. Emily smiled serenely. Oh, Richard, I wouldn't dream of it. As the speeches began, Richard took the stage, thanking his investors and boasting about his vision. Then, the event organizer announced a surprise. The primary investor in Thornton Towers wished to speak. Richard's smile faltered as Emily stepped forward, taking the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily began, her voice steady, "I'm Emily Harper, the majority stakeholder in Thornton Towers. I'm thrilled to be part of this project, but I have a confession." The crowd leaned in, intrigued. Richard's face paled. "I'm the one who invested $4 million to save this project," Emily continued. "And I did it because I believe in second chances. You see, I was once called a beggar by someone in this room." She paused, locking eyes with Richard. "But I've learned that true wealth isn't about money. It's about dignity, resilience, and standing up for yourself." The crowd erupted in applause. But Richard stood frozen, his empire now partially owned by the woman he'd mocked for years. Whispers spread through the room as people realized what had happened. Emily stepped off the stage, leaving Richard to face the humiliation alone. In the months that followed, Emily and James used the remaining funds to start their art studio, which quickly became a hub for young artists in Brooklyn. Emily never flaunted her wealth, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. Richard, humbled by the experience, tried to mend his relationship with Emily, but she kept him at arm's length. She didn't need his approval anymore. As for the $4 million, Emily considered it well spent, not just for the stake in Thornton Towers, but for the priceless moment when she reclaimed her power and showed the world that a beggar could rise to become a queen. And every time Richard walked into Thornton Towers, he was reminded of the woman who outsmarted him, not with anger, but with grace and a perfectly executed plan.